Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Martha from Martha Is. Today's video is the second half of my February wrap up. I will link the first half in the description box down below. I decided to split these up into two videos because I thought that trying to cram them all into one was going to be too long a video. I did that in January and I just thought I was waffling on for ages and ages. So let's try mid-month and end of the month, but let me know if you prefer the other way around in the comments down below. Let's crack on. So I have 6 books to talk about today. 5 that I read and 1 that I gave up on. So in the first half of February, it was full of children's books and graphic novels because, and I don't know if I mentioned this, I had flu. And I feel like I've been talking about flu for longer than I actually had flu. So you can tell me to shut up. I'm being a massive drama queen. But essentially, I started the month reading some pretty heavy books. I was finishing off Emma, which is a very long classic, and sorry, I feel like I've got my eyelashes stuck together. I was finishing off Emma, and I started books like The Shipping News, which is really sad, Me and White Supremacy. I needed to do a reread of Rebecca, and so these are all kind of either really big or really meaty books. And then I got my flu, my reading got completely derailed, and I just didn't have the concentration to do anything. So I ended up reading a lot of kids' books and graphic novels, and I have, in fact, got 3 graphic novels for you today. So let's crack on with those. So I think I said in my last video that I've been dropping by a shop in Brighton, because I've been going back and forth to Brighton more often recently, and there's this amazing graphic novel shop called Dave's Comics, which is just like heaven for graphic novels. So basically every time I go to Brighton, I go in and buy at least 2 so far, and they are not cheap, but fuck it. So this one, Mooncakes, this is one that I bought I think most recently, and I read it on the train home. This is essentially a fantasy graphic novel of a teenage witch, Nova, and a werewolf, Tam, and they were friends as kids, and then they got separated because Tam's family left where they were living, and then they've come back together because there's this rumour of this demon in the woods that only a werewolf can kill. So they come back into each other's lives for that reason, and then the story is about how they kind of reunite and how they battle the demon. So I guess, I don't know if this is classed as young adult, I guess it probably would be young adult, I don't know. But what I really loved about this, so I really liked the artwork, I really liked the characters, it was funny. So there's the 2 nanas who are really funny, they're also witches. And then I also really liked about this book, it had great LGBTQ plus representation. So one of the main characters is non-binary. I feel like the nanas are together. I mean, it's not explicitly said, but I feel like it's kind of obvious. And there's also disability rep, because the main teenage witch Nova is deaf. And I thought that was dealt with really well. There wasn't this kind of massive emphasis on it as some kind of, making life difficult for her. But it was kind of referenced. And yeah, I just thought both were done really, really well. And as it should be, the graphic novel isn't about LGBTQ, isn't about disability. Those things are just there. They're just represented really well. So I really liked this. I would really, really recommend it. What else should I touch on now? Okay, so another graphic novel, The Wolf of Baghdad. So my lovely husband bought this for me from Dave's Comics at the end of January. This I thought was really interesting. I think I might have talked about this in a book haul actually. Essentially, it's about Jews in Baghdad. So there's Carol Isaacs, is of Iraqi Jewish heritage, and she is essentially going back over her family's history, being Jewish in Baghdad. And so this was a whole area of history that I had absolutely no idea was a thing. Essentially, Nazism extended out from Europe, shocker, but you don't learn that at school, or at least I didn't, and carried with it the associated anti-Semitism. And as Jews were a minority religion in Iraq, which was predominantly Muslim, they were discriminated against, treated very badly, and then eventually actually expelled in the 1960s and 1970s. And expelled, they weren't allowed to take any money with them, any of their property. All of that had to be forfeited in order for them to be able to leave. And obviously they didn't leave. They faced, discrimination, violence, all sorts of awful things. So I think, this sums it up quite well actually in the blurb. So in the 1940s, a third of Baghdad's population was Jewish. Within a decade, nearly all 150,000 of Iraq's Jews had fled. Of those remaining, most escaped in the 1970s or were killed. Today, fewer than half a dozen remain. Yeah, so that's just absolutely staggering. As a graphic novel, I didn't love it. The reason I didn't love it was actually because it was very sparse. And I think I flipped through it in the shop and didn't really quite clock how sparse it was. So what you can see here, and the art is really beautiful again, but the art has no associated narrative with it. So the only text you have is these quotes from kind of her ancestors and people that her family knew. So that gives you some idea, but I think for me, because this was kind of opening my eyes to this whole period of history that I had no idea of, I was left wanting a little bit more. I think if I had to compare it to anything, it would be Persepolis, which is possibly unfair. There's an overlap in terms of the Iraq-Iran, the kind of Middle Eastern connection and going back over like the history. So with Persepolis, for example, she's talking a lot more about the Iranian Revolution. And actually, I think the artistic style is not that far apart. But I think with Persepolis, you get a lot more kind of comic element, as in like narrative words with the art. So, yes, so I think for me, I wouldn't not recommend it for that reason. I think it's a very good starter. I think I didn't enjoy it as much because I didn't feel like I was able to really get into it and dig into it and understand what was being said, if that makes sense. So if you're interested in this period of history and you do just kind of want a very sort of simple snapshot, this is a really good one to start with. And to be fair, there is a list at the back with recommended reading, so I definitely will hit up some of that. But yeah, so I think I gave it 3 stars for that reason. It was kind of, I'm not sure about it. And then the third graphic novel that I read in the second half was Glass Town. So I think I might have also talked about this in a book called, can't remember. This is recently published by Isabel Greenberg. I haven't read any Isabel Greenberg before, but I know she's quite well known in graphic novels. And this is about the Bronte sisters and their brother as kind of growing up as kids. And it's sort of like an imagined... So it is kind of, she says it's basically fiction. It isn't non-fiction, but it's based on their juvenilia, so the writing that they did as kids and the worlds they sort of created. And basically it's told almost like parallel, so you see the Brontes' lives as they were growing up, then you also see what was happening in the world that they created together, and then you also see a future timeline of Charlotte being the last one left because all of her brothers and sisters had died. She was the last one standing, and she's being visited by some of her old characters that she created kind of in her mind. So it's really interesting. I found it very imaginative, very creative. Again, I really liked the art. So you can see here the art. I liked trying to understand a little bit more about the other sisters, so like Emily and Anne. Emily particularly is portrayed as someone who is a lot more kind of feisty, and I don't really know much about the Bronte sisters at all. I think for me, the jumping back and forth in the story didn't completely work for me. So this was another, I think I gave it 3.5 stars. I did like it. It's just, it felt quite sort of fragmented, and I think that's probably because the source material was quite fragmented. So again, it's not, I wouldn't not recommend it for that reason, but I think it's one that I wouldn't necessarily be in a rush to read again, and didn't like absolutely love. I think it reminded me actually of a graphic novel about Frida Kahlo. Let's see if I've got it down here. This one. So it reminded me a little bit of this one, and that is because in this one, this again is sort of, I think, imagined, like, it's sort of maybe creative non-fiction or even just fiction about Frida Kahlo's life, but she's essentially having conversations with death. And so that kind of imagined other voice. So in Glasstown, it's Charlotte Bronte and her character, who is kind of, she's having conversation with. In Frida, it's Frida and death. So they were quite sort of similar from that perspective. So if you liked one, you might like the other, is what I would say. So in terms of the other 3 books, we had 3 graphic novels there in the second half. Then we had the shipping news. So this is one that I started. I was doing as a buddy read with someone on Instagram, and I DNF'd it, actually. So I think what it was, like I said, I started it before I got flu, and it was just, from the very beginning, it is so sad. Like, really sad. And so then after I got better, I wasn't in a rush to pick it up because it was sad. I'd already said to my friend who was buddy reading, I was like, I'm really sorry, I don't know when I'm going to be able to get back to it because I'm not feeling well. And then she had finished it, and I asked her, and she did say it doesn't get a lot better in that sense. It is still quite kind of sad. And I just thought, there's just nothing that's really compelling me to finish it for that reason. I am going to keep it because it's part of my Matchbook Classics set, so I might want to revisit it again. It wasn't I really don't like this, I definitely never want to read it again kind of DNF, where I would just get rid of the book. But yeah, I kind of thought maybe one day I might want to pick it up again when I'm in a better frame of mind. Then we have this one, When the Body Says No, by Gabor Mate. So I bought this earlier in the month as recommended by my therapist. I put a post on Instagram, which I will link down below, reviewing this book and talking a bit about my experience of reading it. I won't go into too much detail here because I could really do a whole video on this, but essentially I am in a position where I am being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, which is a chronic autoimmune disease. I say I'm in the process of being diagnosed because our beloved NHS, as much as it is, I am so grateful for it, waiting times are long, and so I probably won't find out for sure until April, though the specialist I've seen is quite confident that that's what it is. So that's obviously, been quite a difficult thing to wrap my head around, because also, like, my physical symptoms are very mild, like right now, and this is the case with MS quite often, so it relapses and you recover from relapses. I've got basically no symptoms at all right now, and haven't for like a month and a half, so it's weird to try and kind of get your brain to reconcile this massive difference between what your body is experiencing and this kind of massive thing that you're being told that has quite sort of big emotional ramifications. So yeah, that's been quite a difficult thing for me. But this book, so my therapist recommended this book because it is particularly about how stress and repressed emotions play a role in autoimmune diseases, such as multiple sclerosis, IBS, which I also have, arthritis, motor neuron disease, things like that. And yeah, so like I said, I've done a post on Instagram about it. I found it a very difficult read, but by the time I'd finished it, I really understood why my therapist had recommended it to me, because ultimately what it's saying is that it's about the mind-body connection, essentially. It's not saying that you are at fault, that you have brought the disease on yourself. It's saying that repressing your emotions and not addressing them could make you worse, could make it harder to deal with. And so doctors should be asking more about what is going on in your life, like not just kind of focusing on the physical symptoms, like what's your context, what are you dealing with, are you caring for another person, are you in a very high stress job, all those kinds of things, because those things play a role. So yeah, I would, if you are in a position like mine or anything like that, or you know someone, this could be a book that's worth picking up. But like I said, it's not an easy read. The important thing is to really read what he's saying, because he is very clear. It is not about blame, it is not about attributing fault. So read that, because your brain will go, I brought this on myself, or this was always going to happen because of certain things I experienced as a child, or whatever, and that doesn't help you. So yeah, try to actually read, if you're going to read this, read what he's actually writing. Don't just kind of let your brain go off and assume a whole load of things that it's telling you. That is what I would say. So then, and this video has gone on a lot longer than I thought it was going to, but luckily we are on to the last book. We are on to the last book. We are on to my favourite book of February, which was The Kiss Quotient, which I gave 5 stars wholeheartedly. So I said that I dealt with my recovering from flu with kids books and graphic novels, but the other genre that I used to help myself get better and get back into reading was romance. And I am really starting to become into romance. I was always a massive snob about romance, but I read books like The Flatshare last year, and this one, oh, I loved it. I literally zipped through it in under 24 hours. So this is a book about Stella. So Stella is a woman with autism, and she is feeling a lot of pressure from her parents to settle down, to find a husband, but she finds it quite difficult to date. She finds it quite difficult to kind of connect to men. She also finds sex very difficult. So she decides to hire a male escort to teach her how to be good at sex. So her autism, part of her autism is that she can be quite obsessive and quite focused on I guess, structure. So she works in data, for example. So she's essentially being like, okay, well, these are things, I need to learn how to do a hand job. I need to learn how to do a blow job. I need to learn how to be good at sex. Like, yeah. So, and then you enter Michael, who is this male escort who is super hot. And he's obviously presented with this woman who's not like any other woman that he's met before. And he's a bit kind of, okay. And then, of course, he ends up falling in love with her. And that's how the story goes, essentially. It is so hot. It's basically softcore porn again. So if you've seen some of my other videos, you might have seen me talk about the A Court of Thorns and Roses series, which I discovered at the end of last year, which was basically porn. So my eyes are being opened to genres, to types of books that seem like, you know, a very kind of simple, like, romancy cover, but actually it's just sex. It's porn. It's like legitimate legal porn. So I'd recommend it. Steamy and romance, and also on a more serious note, I thought it did a really good job of representing autism. So, and I say that as someone who does not have autism, so if you feel differently, please do, you know, call me in about it. I suppose where I'm coming from is that autism traditionally is portrayed as mainly affecting young white boys. So it's particularly in TV and films and stuff like that, you will see young white boys kind of rocking back and forth, feeling, you know, they can't be overstimulated, maybe having tantrums because they're overstimulated, etc. But then it gives the perception that autism is something that mainly affects white boys, white men. And here we have a woman of Asian heritage, or possibly mixed Asian heritage, I can't remember, who has autism, and how that kind of impacts and how that sort of intersects with the expectations on gender, the expectations of what it means to be feminine, of, you know, an almost an expectation of women pleasing men, particularly in a sexual context. So I thought that was really well handled, and it wasn't a kind of, I suppose there was an element of like autism holding her back, but I think it's also about the realization that she is who she is, and she needs to learn to accept who she is, and other people should accept who she is, and all the ways in which she's amazing, and all the ways in which autism helps her. So it's like I said, neurodivergent. It's not a problem. So yeah, so for that reason, I thought it was handled really well, and yeah, super hot. Loved it. Really loved it. Ordered the next one in the series immediately. So I will be reading that soon. That's it. I've waffled on for a long time. I'm going to stop now. If you've read any of these books, let me know what you thought. If you really think I should go back to the shipping news, tell me. Yeah. Hope you're all having a lovely day. Look forward to seeing you again soon. Please do give me a thumbs up if you liked this video. Subscribe. Yeah. See you again soon. Bye.